Okay, welcome everybody. We are going to have one item today, and it is the one we started talking about last meeting. And we've been asked by the chair to think globally with this issue in terms of homeless shelters' proximity to not only our local schools, but schools in general. I should say not just Peck Slip, but our CB1 schools in general, because that's what we weigh in on. And, where we had gotten in the previous meeting is that we felt as though the overriding whereas was that we are really specific with where liquor stores and food carts and other items are in proximity to schools. And the one thing that has never been discussed are homeless shelters, most importantly, the kind of homeless shelter that's going in at this location, which is a men's shelter. It is a men's shelter where substances are allowed, as well as the comings and goings unmonitored from the homeless shelter community. Tell me the name of these kinds again. They are called, sorry? Safe Haven, thank you. And so we felt it was appropriate to provide guidance in this resolution to develop the same parameters as we have for those other things. So that was the overriding whereas is that this exists for these other stores. And I mean, they do it with churches. And so therefore be it resolved that we recommend that there be no sightings of safe haven shelters within the 500 feet of a school in our district. We had some other points that I had passed off to Desi and Morton, so I'm anxious for them to come. I'm hoping that they have them and that.
Desi's not coming, Morton is expected.
Is that right? Because she has the points. Okay, well, we can generate them again and have the discussion again. So if anybody wants to chime in on other whereases that we should include, as well as the appropriate results in this resolution, that'd be great.
You have to vote to remove the previous resolution that you guys voted, and then you'll re-vote on the new contents.
Okay, so why don't we do
All
that
in favor?
first? All in favor of removing the one we did last meeting? Okay,
Yes, we have one.
okay.
Cody, how do you vote with the camera?
Oh, sorry. I just,
Camera,
hold on, here it comes.
camera, please. Thank you. Okay, that's a yes.
I had a, yes, but I also just had a point of excuse me, I'm suffering here. Point of clarification. I think it's called a low barrier shelter, which makes it easier for individuals with mental health issues and substance use to, to use and come back, or that's what I think this is. Not just,
Okay, thank you, Cody.
you're welcome.
We'll use that terminology instead. Are you good to cancel the previous resolution and work on the new one today?
Sure,
Okay,
yes.
all right. So floor is open. Anyone want to contribute any thoughts?
So we commented on similar protocol or philosophy regarding these types of facilities in similar vein to liquor stores, cannabis, et cetera.
Yeah.
Was one of the points closer coordination with the community before these types of decisions are taken?
I think we did take on the process that currently exists for citing these, which is backwards,
Right.
where the deal is done for the location without the provider being in place. And that was a whereas that then led us to the fact that especially if that's the process, then we need to make sure that it's understood that no shelters be placed within 500 feet so that we don't have to argue those semantics after the fact.
Right, yeah.
We went back and forth on 500 feet, 300 feet. I think we ultimately settled on, let's just ask them what we want and let them figure it out.
Right,
That's what we said with the 500 feet.
exactly. All right, so that is the therefore be it resolved. We're asking for that. And we're saying whereas, shelters are a necessary part of any community to help those in need in our community. It's important for us to talk about as a youth committee that we support shelters in our community district. We just don't support them near schools. And we can use the existing proposal as a whereas as well, saying whereas we found ourselves in this situation after the fact because of the way these shelters are sited. I think that's important to include because they could be tempted to come back saying, oh, well, we won't put a low barrier shelter in the space when they know that they can't prevent that based on how they site them. So we were going to include something about that in the whereases as well.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Or is it?
No, no, no.
I'm using around.
Please.
Is there, I don't know if it's already defined in the resolution, but is there anything that's defined called a low barrier shelter? In addition to, of course, like the drug use and things like that. A big concern from my side is that there's people who have been convicted of sex crimes and sex offenders are able to live in these shelters. Which again, I'm glad that people can get resources if they need, but being so close to the schools is the opposite of what we would want, that type of population with those convictions. So we'd be interested in making sure that that's somehow like referenced or included in whatever is defined, however you're defining.
Well, one of the ways we avoided getting into the trap of calling out the kinds of things that people in the shelters have been through, been convicted of, suffer from, is to just say no shelters. And I think that's where we got tied up last meeting, is that we were working so hard to find like the exact language of the kind of shelter that we realized that it wasn't realistic anyway, given the way they cite them, which is, again, they say yes to the deal without knowing what kind of shelter. And so we are just going after the no shelter period. And I think that's much cleaner because then we don't get tied up in things just like that, only to then have forgotten the one, right? That will then hang us in the end. And I think it's not an appropriate placement for a homeless shelter. I mean, we kept focusing on that meeting at the fact that it would be much, much better if it was a family shelter.
That's what I was thinking, is like, would there be a difference if it was if it was a women/family shelter, but.
It possibly, but then we don't know enough about shelters to know if it's exclusively women and children, and if they have, distinctions between low barrier and that environment, if there's still, maybe the parent still has been accused of, a sexual crime. Like, we can't, I think that was the problem we kept running into, is that there were so many things that we just couldn't project, that we just went for the no. And I honestly think that, I don't think they're gonna be open to revisiting the process for which they cite these things. And so I think it's just as realistic to go for no shelters as it is low barrier shelter. Personally, the more I got thinking about it. I mean, certainly if someone disagrees with me, chime in,
I think that's what
but We think it's just the cleanest, easiest way to go about it, and, also support other locations. There are appropriate locations for all kinds of shelters in our community district. It just takes some thoughtfulness in terms of, and that's something else. I think we actually, had it in the therefore be it resolved that we also remediate the siting process so that appropriate shelters are placed in appropriate places in other places in our community district. Because there'd be other inappropriate places to have a low barrier shelter. Especially given our zoning, we have this commercial residential mixed use neighborhood, which could put anything next to anything if someone's not paying attention. I remember that we had this situation where the city was trying to move a pink summons court over to West Broadway and Thomas Street to a Supreme Court building they have there, which is just for hearings. Traditionally our courts are east of Broadway. That's sort of the government district, right? And for some reason, we saw just a flurry of applications for condominiums, permits for condominiums in the government part of the neighborhood. And then we saw a flurry of applications for government agencies, offices to be moved to the residential part of the neighborhood. And that was those of you who were there at the time remember this. It was a really big deal. It was not an appropriate place to have a pink summons court. You have 3 outdoor restaurants flanking it. And if anybody's ever been to a pink summons court, you know that there's a queue outside the building that wraps around the building. And that pink summons is everything from public urination to parking tickets to just, assault and petty stuff, but some of it's not so pretty. And when you think about combining those two things with, in a heavily residential neighborhood where life is very much outside too, we fought that and we won. But took a long time. So I think we've gone after things before in terms of appropriate use in the neighborhood, and that people now have a better understanding of, our very, very mixed use neighborhood. Because we do encompass the courthouses here, and it's really different. But that, for instance, would be an appropriate placement for a shelter, somewhere in more the business district where they're not on top of schools and residential buildings. But, and right now we have such a high vacancy rate in our commercial buildings, it's a perfect time to make this recommendation. So.
I saw there was an article, sorry, I'm a little late, I had to file something on document, one of my cases. I saw an article or posting on Facebook about a lot of the downtown office buildings are now being considered for residential conversion. It was on this morning. They were talking about 222 Broadway, where the Zara store is. That's to somebody.
Yeah, the only problem is they don't adjust the infrastructure load when they did that on Wall Street.
Did they?
And we had 12 feet of trash.
They 25 water, 1 wall, 111 wall, 100 wall, 14 wall, 80 pine, 77 water. Some of these are in existence for quite a while, but 160 water, 55 broad. Others rumored to come are 85 broad, 61 Broadway, and 150 William. And I know that there's some buildings where some of the smallish office tenants are being pushed out. And the only reasonable explanation that could be is that the owners of the buildings are considering following these footsteps. So I think there's going to be a lot more, or at least the owners hope there's going to be a lot more residential conversion. And I think it's in some of the electeds running on that concept too, that there should be a lot more office to residential conversions.
Well, their hope is that it's affordable housing, but, you know,
That's another question.
don't have a great track record for that.
I agree with
If
that.
it was affordable housing, it'd be one thing, because we certainly need that. But I have a feeling it's gonna be another luxury condominium,
Well,
and
the market hasn't proven too efficient in order to create affordable housing just because by adding units.
no,
Because, in my opinion, because of the demand for luxury housing is, it seems to be inexhaustible, and in terms of Manhattan, because the supply in this limited area is rather limited. So you can increase the supply, but the demand seems to outstrip the supply. And then the owners and developers really don't want to. They'd rather make more money than less.
correct? Why not?
It's human nature.
But it gives an example of how there are many, many places to place this that are not on top of a school.
So, if you don't mind, where do we stand now on?
So we had actually passed this resolution. We just voted to unpass it and pass another one, because I had handed notes to Desi, and I thought she was clear. But so what we're doing is we're going back over the points that we all discussed and agreed upon, and we're rewriting the resolution tonight so that we can pass it. And so far, we've gotten to the whereas that there are, no liquor stores, no cannabis shops within 500 feet of a school. Whereas the siting process for shelters is that they site them and then after the fact, choose the shelter. We talked about whereas it's important to have shelters in every community district to serve the needs of the community district.
Mhm.
Whereas we could even add that we have a tremendous amount of commercial real estate laying vacant at the moment, which provides an opportunity to place, which illustrates the fact that there are many, many locations that they could be using to site commercial enterprises like this. And we then have it therefore be it resolved that we say no to all kinds of shelters within 500 feet of a school. And we also talked about adding a therefore be it resolved that we encourage the city to remediate its siting process for shelters so that the kind of shelter is considered along with the placement, the geographic placement of that shelter.
Right,
So
well,
that's where we are right now.
if I could make a comment, a couple of comments.
Cody has a question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Cody has a question online.
Oh, do you want to do that first?
That's up to the chair.
Okay.
I'll be quick.
Okay.
I just have a concern with all shelters instead of like low barrier shelters, or at least in some respect or some part of the resolution, putting a fine point on low barrier shelters versus like, again, if it were immigrant families or, other forms of women's shelter. I'm just raising that as a concern.
No, we agreed with you at the beginning of last meeting, but what we landed on is the fact that they can't be trusted to change the process that they are using to site shelters. And that process is that an RFP goes out for the space, the deal is made, and then after the fact, they decide unilaterally which shelter goes in the spot. And that's what happened to Peck Slip. And when the Quality of Life Committee asked those representatives if they could get a women's and family shelter sited there instead of a men's low barriers shelter, we were told no, that they did their research and that was the kind of shelter that was needed the most in the neighborhood. And so that just illustrates the lack of control or discretion or anything else that goes on in terms of these placements. And it leaves us with no other choice but to say no in general within 500 feet of a school. Now, that does not mean we're not supportive of family shelters. What we are saying in both the whereas and the therefore be it resolved is there's a million places to put these shelters that are more appropriate than sharing a wall with an elementary school. And I think that's where we are with that, Cody. So we're not saying no to the shelters in general. But we are recommending saying no next to a school because we can't control the kind of shelter. Wait a minute, Morton's next, I'm sorry.
All right, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've also been talking to a lot of people, some of the electeds and people in the community. I'm not sure that I personally agree to a fixed number of distance. I know that came up last time at 500 feet. I think that might narrow, make it very inflexible and make it very difficult to find spaces to actually have a shelter. Like, for example, the one right next to Peck Slip, I felt was totally inappropriate. It was right adjacent to the building. Everybody knows the facts. I don't have to go over them. On the other hand, previously, although I don't think it's ever going to open because I haven't heard anything about it, there was the other one on, was it Spruce Street, or Ann Street? That was supposed to be, yes, Spruce. That one, that may have been within 500 feet of the Spruce Street School. It seemed like almost equidistant between the Spruce Street and the Peck Slip School. That one, I didn't feel would be that problematic in the context that was, that I just.
Beekman. It was like next to the firehouse.
Yeah, the next
43
fire, yeah.
Beekman, is that right?
Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. I think that fell by the wayside because they never reached a deal on the space. And I think that one would not have been right next to either school. It would have been somewhat off the beaten path. I didn't see how that one would interfere with the operation of either the Spruce Street or the Peck Slip School. And I think for my feelings, my inclination is that there needs to be a certain flexibility. And the problem with the Peck Slip shelter and any shelter was that as the city officials who came down, they said they treated it as a real estate deal. And it should not be a real estate deal.
Right.
And that, you know, they have just a slightly narrow the definition of what they do. They have an open, I've understood, an open RFP, which is like always there. So anybody can come to the city in response for the open RFP, the request for proposal. Here's our proposal. In response to your request, we propose a shelter at this location. And it so happened, it's an open secret, that the backers, the developers, the sponsors, the owners were donors and political allies of the mayor. We've seen how the mayor has allegedly, or not so allegedly, treated other donors and allies of the mayor. And it always seemed to me from day one that they got special treatment, and every criticism of the community, every criticism of the stakeholders was shunned to the wayside and disregarded by the city and the powers that be. And the mayor never even deigned to give us a response. And I'm on the Quality of Life Committee as well. Every single month we would meet. And people from the community would come and they would say, we want someone from the mayor's office to come down and respond. And never, to this date, did he ever respond. And that says a lot. So my point is, okay, to sum up, my point is that there should be a process of review before a shelter opens, before it is reviewed, that just like any other project, I'm involved in some of the other issues. there should be a public hearing where people from the community come and express their concerns, and are heard and actually listened to. And the city should be required to listen to people from the community. Required, if it's near a school, anywhere near a school, they should hear from the PTA, they should hear from the parents, they should hear from the
That's
faculty and
in.
staff.
Okay, we do have that in, but if they don't oblige, which they don't have to, then what we landed on is what we landed on to make sure it didn't happen in the future. Now, we can make it, and otherwise, Andrew?
I was just gonna say, well, I don't disagree with anything Morton said. I just think we've seen so many instances where we're asking for community input, we're
Yeah.
asking for community engagement. We can point to the prisons, we can point to a number of school issues, we can point to this. I just think when we offer flexibility, it's abused and we find ourselves swimming against the tide. So I'd love to be in the environment Morton's proposed. I just think we have decades of experience, including very recent, where it doesn't operate that way.
I agree with you.
Well, the other thing is we may or may not get a rule that would be passed that would be, that 500 feet, that would require some legislation.
Well, I mean, one way we could attack that is to have that be, therefore be it resolved and say, if that does not happen, then we demand that no placements are made within 500 feet of a school, period. And that way, they have this opportunity to change their process and go into a public review, or just, sorry, you can't have it near the school. But even that leaves that door open. And to Andrew's point, we've just been here so many times that, as sad as it is, I feel like we just need to go for it. I mean, I'd be more inclined to reduce the amount of feet from the school if everybody thinks it's gonna create this geographic hardship. I actually don't think it will, given how much is available in commercial districts here. But if the majority here feels as though that would be something that we would want to consider, we could do that as a compromise. But I really don't feel trusting to leave that up to the mayor's office to have that discretion.
I say we keep it at 500 feet.
I support that as well.
Eric?
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody? And yes,
I was,
tell me your name.
Joanne Bay.
Joanne, nice meeting you.
Curious also if this includes 500 feet from private schools, or is this just from New York City public schools?
It's all schools.
It's all schools, although I don't know if it was you or didn't someone stipulate that we also thought it applied to schools that were in multifaceted use or mixed use, but didn't we learn something?
If they're on an upper floor,
Okay.
they don't qualify.
What is the school?
So Spruce has ground floor. They're on the ground floor, so they qualify. So it's, what it is like Millennium would qualify. So they're on the 11th through 14th floor at 50 Broad. And those kids, there's no activity there's no lobby area for them. There's no gathering place. There's no yard. There's nothing where the kids are outside. They commute to and from the school and that's it. And they're on an upper floor. And what we heard, not that we can't advocate for it, but what we heard was that they are exempt from that 500-foot rule because of the fact that they're up in the building and not a tenant of the lower 6 stories, which is more traditional.
Did we previously think they were covered by this?
We
And then
did.
we recently learned that they weren't.
We
Okay.
did. It came up, I think it came up in the cannabis discussions. When cannabis was first legalized and we had all the applications flooding the exec committee. I want to say it was then that we learned that, because we were walking off a distance of a school on Broadway, Lower Broadway. I mean, a cannabis application on Lower Broadway.
What qualifies as a school? Would, like, preschool, like, the one on Pine Street, I forget, 70 Pine or whatever.
It qualifies.
Qualified?
All 19 of our nursery schools, preschools are ground, below ground and lower floors. All of our elementary schools are. As well as I think our LMC
Seasonal.
is up. So that would be something we would have to look into.
So, so essentially though, you'd be potentially creating intersecting radii or radiuses of 500 feet, where it's possible, say, on the east side of FIDI, with so many different schools and preschools and other, there'd be no way, no place that would not be within 500 feet of a school, or no realistic place.
Well, you have a
Are
pretty
there liquor
heavy,
stores?
What?
Are there any liquor stores in the zone you're referring to?
There are, not that many. Every time I want to buy a bottle of wine, I have to go. But there are, there's one on Fulton Street, there's one, by, South Street Seaport. There used to be one on Maiden Lane, but they're out of business. Some, but you know, the question is, not every building or, and that's the problem, you know, we don't want every building to be a shelter, but not, you know, the realistic capabilities of a building or a structure to house a shelter are not universal.
Right.
You know, it does create an issue of the potential, you know, to be a devil's advocate. And not to say anything about the Bexley shelter, because I've been opposed to that from day one. But, you know, it was in a place where there's a hotel and realistically could be converted into a shelter. Whereas, you know, other buildings are not that easily converted. So
You say something similar about the 105 Washington one, that's what I live right across.
that was what, a Holiday Inn or something before?
That was the Byron, I'm not even from Washington, but at 105, that was directly across from the Chinese Institute and around the corner from, I think it's elementary school. So it's like just slightly farther than.
No, my son used to go to PS 150, so I know that.
yeah, it's just out of range of 150, but just.
Is that one even 500, outside of 500?
We were told that it was, the principal chimed in that it was far enough away. So I don't know if anybody walked it off, but they were consulted at the time of that going in to see how they felt about it. So I don't know if they walked it off, to be honest with you.
I would say at the time of it going in, to the time it opened, it drastically changed the population and what was allowed and what wasn't, so I don't think that.
Well, I mean, it will be interesting to hear what they have to say after the fact about it. That, I mean, this 200 or this 500-foot rule wasn't in place for that shelter. It was mostly, they were just consulted to say, hey, this application went in, what do you think? And I will say that the principal did not seem as concerned, given where it was. You know, I know that some of the parents were, and it happened really quickly, under the dark of night, as usual, or, you know, it's.
No, that one did not. That,
It
they
did, it
actually-
happened over a school holiday, Morton, which is the dark of night in the school
they came,
world.
they came to, I was there. They came to the PTA. My wife was the vice president of PTA. They had meetings. The same people who came before the community board, at least months or even a year in advance of it opening, they addressed.
The Washington Street one, they went,
No, I'm talking, the one that was the, not the migrant shelter, the 105 Washington, yeah.
I think it like gone through in 2020 or like sold or something like that then, and.
Yeah, it
by the time
opened,
changing, even the day that it opened.
So getting back to this resolution,
Mhm.
right? Was there consensus on the 500 foot?
I think we have consensus on 500 feet here.
I'm not, I disagree, but if I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted.
Well, that's what I meant by consensus. The vote of the table was.
Five.
Yes.
I've had this discussion with some people a lot, and there are people who don't agree on 500 feet for the reasons I expressed, and
Mhm.
I think they make a convincing point. I think that you need to have an option to look at a specific situation, like, for example, the Washington Street one. It wasn't right next to PS 150. It was in the back, down the street, around the corner, where it was in relative proximity, a well-run shelter there actually, and again, it depends on how you operate it. If you're actually taking people from the neighborhood off the street and putting them there, which should be the priority, if you're putting a shelter in a neighborhood, you should have a priority so that people are not sleeping on the floor of the Fulton Transit Center, or they're not people who are around on the streets on the corner, passed out, doing whatever, or wandering around the neighborhood. The priority should be to solve a homeless problem and to assist the people in the neighborhood, in my view. It's like you have a firehouse because you don't want fires. You have a homeless shelter, so you get homeless people off the street. So sometimes a homeless shelter could serve a very useful function.
So that was 800 feet. PS 150 to 105 Washington, just so that's solved.
So
Um,
were we discussing other points that we thought needed to go into the resolution?
I only have those that I just read to you, which is, it's important to have shelters. We support having shelters of all kinds in Community Board 1. Whereas the city has a process where they make the real estate deal prior to citing the type of shelter that goes in to the space, which has created an issue at Peck Slip School and forced the community to come out against this placement. And then the two therefore be it resolves are that therefore be it resolved that no shelters within 500 feet shall be no shelters shall be placed within 500 feet of a school going forward. And therefore be it resolved that for other shelters in our community district, that the city look at appropriate placements for the type of shelter it is for, in terms of where they put it.
And we don't think that second, therefore be it resolved in any way weakens the first one? I'm not saying it does, I'm asking because you had.
Yeah, I don't think it does. I think it's, we don't have to do it because we're youth and education. So we could just leave it out and have that one, therefore be it resolved, be powerful and let the quality of life committee handle that,
I actually think that's smart.
because that really is more their thing than ours. So we can just mix that and stick with, because that's our job. It's really talking about schools.
So my question is, this thing is gonna open in, is it July? What was the time frame?
September,
September.
is that right, Jesse?
I'm not quite sure.
So,
But this-
Perhaps it gets delayed, perhaps not. But so-
I think it still could be next.
Okay, well, in the spirit of disclosure, I think I'm the only one here, I know the committee has it, my daughter's finishing up 4th grade. So she'll be there next week. You have a,
Yeah.
4.2.
we have two
All right, good.
Peck Slip kids.
all right, so that
No,
makes the two of us.
my kid is not a Peck Slip.
I guess my question is, what, and maybe this isn't for maybe this is for the next week. What mitigation can we do? Do we post a school officer on the corner there? Do I have to stand out there, every day, making sure things are okay? I mean, look,
You're saying.
we have to talk about, yeah, once it opens, let's pretend for a minute that this thing is opening September, October, whatever, right? It's gonna be there next week. They have a great office. Officer McLeod's amazing. She's in the, entrance there. She's there all the time, right?
Right.
I wonder if she sleeps there, but, maybe we need some more, we need to talk about that too.
Well, that's phase 2.
Not probably not for the purpose of, that's for future business.
Yeah, we're just gonna get this done
Yeah.
and we're gonna plan on winning this. Sharon. So our goal is that we're gonna prevent this shelter from going in. Now, if all fails after we submit this month, then yes, the village will come together. We will insist that they provide security. We will, then go that extra yard to make sure that everyone is safe. And that was, if you weren't at that original quality of life meeting, it went on for hours talking about what we would require of them if they ever were successful, which they hope they aren't. And it did include 24-hour guards and things like that. The idea of it, I'm not gonna say they agreed to it. I'm gonna say it was discussed ad nauseum.
Okay.
The fact that there had to be protections.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Does this, so the first therefore be it resolved was a broad headline statement. no shelters within 500 feet of schools. Is there anything that specifically talks to not proceeding with Peck Slip? I mean, with the shelter next to Peck Slip, that this isn't meant to kick in after? this
That's a good point, Andrew. So yes, we should isolate that as well. And
Right.
say, therefore be it resolved that the proposed shelter at whatever that address is, not go through, and that they find another use for that space. And the contract, I think, is with the shelter company. So the one thing we could consider, because it's gonna be very hard for them to back out of the entire real estate deal, is, we could consider saying, I really don't want to give them that out. We could just specifically say, therefore be it resolved that this includes the shelter next to Peck
So
Slip
if your
School.
first therefore be it resolved is the headline statement, no shelters within 500 feet of the school. Therefore be it resolved, this should prevent this,
Shelter from going in here as well.
correct? I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but something to that.
No, but you're right. They could, make the assumption this is for after this one and that we're troubleshooting. And so this would define that we're not troubleshooting, we're including this shelter.
We also,
So-
in any active RFPs or any active like conversations about like real estate deals.
That's the only one in our community district right now, but we could say any active RFPs, including the one at Peck's, next to Peck Slip School. That's
I'm not
perfectly.
sure that's an active
Let me-
RFP. That might be.
If I just, sometimes people get mad at me because I'm a lawyer and I like precision. The way I've come to understand it is that it's not like a series of RFPs, there's an open RFP. Bring that, if, we will build it if you come, so bring us project. And what happened, and specifically what happened with the Peck Slip shelter, is that the developer bought the property and they are in the shelter business. Better for worse, that's their business, it's not the city's business. They then partner with the shelter operator. And together, they come to the city in response to the open RFP. Now, they don't come to say, Department of Homeless Services, you tell us what type of shelter you'd like. They come with a proposal. We will operate a safe haven shelter. This is our proposal. And I've been told, and I'm led to understand, the reason they do that is because that is the most profitable shelter that they can run. They get paid hotel rates as opposed to rent.
So we do know this, Martin. So we're
All right,
actually
But
like.
the idea, whether you know it, it's not being expressed in the
But I
resolution.
think you're mentioning in the context of RFP language, so how would you propose
Well,
wording?
I would say before, specifically in the resolution, before the city agrees to contract in response to any proposal from, in response to an RFP, there has to be an evaluation process. There has to be a review process. There has to be a hearing process. They have to hold public hearings. They have to hear from the stakeholders, the parents, the PTA, the neighbors in there. And we demand that they listen.
But is that
and not just
obviated- Is that obviated
I
by the
just feel like
first,
we need to.
whereas, therefore be it resolved?
I don't care if it's 1,000 or 10,000 feet. They should have to consider every shelter, every proposal in the context of the community. Now, people might say, well, everybody objects to shelters. Nobody wants shelters in the community, and it goes all around the city. But still, they should have to consider the concerns of the community. I really get frustrated when I see and hear, the government not listening to the people. And I think that should be part of our resolution.
Well, that was the therefore be it resolved that we just handed back to quality of life. So we can weigh in on it because it's a more general statement, Martin, but I actually just asked Lucy if she could pull up the quality of life resolution because it's likely that it's in there.
Well, it's not quite, it's,
Do you remember? You were at
No.
that meeting.
yeah, I don't remember, I don't.
Because I have a feeling they covered that. And that, you know, we're being called upon to do an auxiliary resolution, just
With
to try
respect
to
to
keep our
schools.
focus, yeah.
That's why I liked your idea of just simplifying it to the school.
Just simplifying it to school
Not-
issue.
Not tackle every issue in this particular resolution. I agree, we should somewhere, but not tackling the issue of every RFP or every project
Right,
within the lower key, within Lower Manhattan. I
Right.
think our resolution should be really to the point about schools.
I do too, because it's gonna sit on top of that one.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? We don't have to be redundant with the points in the QOL. Lucy, you don't need to print out copies for everybody. You can just do one, I'll read it.
I think my point though is, that it's inclusive of not only the one that's like the one that we do know of that's in progress.
Thank you.
Shall I
But
make copies for others or?
It's okay, I'm gonna read it.
I guess there's no RFPs in progress right now, that no others that are creative at the time that this even passes or like anything like that, that it's effective the date that it passed.
Well, I do think it's appropriate to include PEC slip.
Yes.
So we'll definitely include that. It's the only RFP that's come in. And as Andrew just clarified, it's probably moved past the RFP stage.
Mhm.
But it's the only one in our community district that is near a school. So we can be very specific and just call that one out as the second, therefore be it resolved. I'm going to just go through some points in the quality of life one, just to make everybody comfortable what's already been covered. It says, we received notification from Department of Social Services that 320 Pearl planned a safe haven to open the fall of 2024. They talked about, they already have a safe haven shelter with 84 beds at 105 Washington. Another whereas talks about the fact that this has 106 beds. It said that the service provider would be the not-for-profit organization Breaking Ground. It says it did not, the notice did not account for the fact the facility directly abuts a public elementary school. It then goes on to say that the notification was sent at the end of the school year with 6 calendar days left, so no feedback can be given by the school. The building abuts the school. The PEC Slip School has windows that look directly into the rooms of the facility. It supports a large group, 75, the PEC Slip community supports 75 homeless migrant sheltered children. Not really sure what that's about. The community said it would be able to support additional children, I see, and has systems and resources to support homeless families. They talk about the fact that we're gone all summer. They then say they disagree with the citing of this location as safe haven versus a family shelter. Therefore, be it resolved, strongly opposes a safe haven at this location. Insists that DHS, DSS change the type of shelter to a family shelter. Further resolved that demands that DHS, DSS give sufficient time and notice for public meeting and engagement during the school year. Further resolved that it demands that the first public engagement is held after the first PTA meeting. So no, they do not cover this.
They kind of do in that one, therefore be it resolved. Where they talk about public engagement.
They do.
It's general, but it's a broad process statement. But I guess,
Yes, sufficient time and notice for public meeting and engagement. They didn't,
Right.
yeah, they're not just saying to schools.
Right.
So,
but what I guess I have a question, to your point, if our resolution is sitting on top of this is supporting a different kind of shelter at that location.
it is.
So the two resolutions to me seem at odds.
I think it's okay for us to, the one other thing we could consider doing based on this recommendation that is contained here is to say, whereas CB1's Quality of Life Committee called for a family shelter as opposed to a low barrier men's shelter. Whereas the city does not have a track record for
Open,
Change.
transparent, public engagement or?
public engagement and a change of direction based on public engagement. That the citing, whereas we could then, pull in the citing thing, whereas the current citing process is that the real estate deal is done prior to the citing of the shelter, leaving too much vulnerability for the siting of an inappropriate shelter near a school. Therefore, be it resolved, we, the Youth and Education Committee, call for no shelters within 500 feet of schools.
I think that's a good way to.
Do you think that could work?
So, I
Okay,
think it's the only way.
all right.
I just wrote down just some thoughts for two whereas clauses. Is that all right? Did I read it?
Sure.
Whereas the DHS and DSS accepted the proposal for the shelter next to the Peck Slip School without consultation with stakeholders, with public hearing, a hearing from parents, staff, or nearby residents. Whereas no contract should be signed with operators without substantive consideration of the impact of such shelter on the good operation and order of neighborhood schools. And I would ask that those whereas be considered. So, because we're considering how the effect of any shelter in the neighborhood affects the operation of the school, which is our mandate to consider youth and education. And I think that, again, to consider this as a real estate deal for the profit of a private developer without consideration of its impact on the students and the teachers and the learning environment of the school is just abhorrent.
I think because you added the language about operations of schools, that does make it a relevant whereas
Yeah.
to. Right, in the past, when you mentioned process, I think it was missing that language, but incorporating it, I think makes it relevant. to this
I just scrolled it off.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Okay,
couldn't work
Morgan,
on,
can you send that to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
you want, I'll type it up and,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want it right now or?
No, you can type it up and send it to me.
Or I could take a photo of it and you do whichever you prefer.
Okay.
That's my- People can't read my hand.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest Tricia want that typed.
When I was in law school.
I shouldn't say anything, my
When,
handwriting's
when I
terrible.
was in law school, my professor once pulled me out and took my blue book before laptops and made me dictate it to his secretary so he could read my handwriting.
I can't read my own, so. All right, so I think we've got it. We have one, therefore be it resolved. And that's it. Yes, did you have a question?
I hate to ask this, but I just haven't heard any input from BMIC still on Instagram. So as somebody was voting on the resolution, I just wanted to, that it was at the end. Right, but this is about a resolution for the safety of children. So I'm just curious to hear, like, any of your thoughts.
Well, I'm speaking right now currently, so.
Are you on the?
Yeah, I'm on the board.
We have young people on the board.
No,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like one of the younger. but,
I love it. Yeah, so,
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've.
They'll
Like,
have
voting on the
they'll have old
resolution.
people on.
no, yeah, I'm just saying, like, as somebody. on the
People
board.
aren't required to give feedback.
I understand.
If they hear something that has been covered, it's okay for them not to say anything. They do have to vote.
Right, I just, I know that your audience, you were spelling on Instagram, I just wasn't sure they were engaged.
I am very, yeah, I am engaged, so thanks for checking. I would say like most of my thoughts, like, are in cohesion with whatever the board is saying, so I think I have a different opinion, but, I would say as someone who's like volunteered in the shelter before and like done it a lot, like, I understand the like point of view, someone who wants to have a shelter and it should be everywhere, and like, I live in one of the upper districts where we have a lot of homeless shelters, like way more than we have down here, and as somebody who goes to school here and rarely sees any, and like there's none near my school, so I think it's important to me to have that in this district, but I would say it's not the case, and I think that's what everybody here pretty much treats, so.
All right. So are we there?
Plus,
Anybody second, okay? All in favor of passing this resolution? All opposed? Passed. Cody?
I can't turn my camera on. Here we go. I'm abstaining.
Yeah,
Okay.
Amy.
Just because, it's all shelters. I'm just having sort of a concern about that.
Okay, Gary.
All righty. Thank you, everybody.
Good one.
July So I'm announcing that we will not be meeting in July. We will be meeting in June. I want to just make a quick announcement that I have been working on this Stuyvesant gym situation. For those of you, we had it on an agenda a while back. And I haven't brought it to the committee because we haven't needed an action by CB1, but I'm acting on the part of CB1. So I told Tammy I would announce that I'm working with the SCA and the principal to try to remediate the situation we have in their workout gym, not their basketball gym. So if you're familiar with Stuyvesant High School, it's now kind of old and needs remediation in general. The facility, it's hard to believe because those of us who've been here for many, many years see it as a new school. But I did the walkthrough and boy, the locker room and the bathrooms and the doors are broken and, you know, it really needs a lot of work. Anyway, they have a weight room there that doubles as a gym for the community center that now runs out of Stuyvesant. That is a partnership between Battery Park City and there's a lot of people that have a hand in it, like Port Authority and because Nick was there. So there's a lot of people that are partners in this community center that is a really best kept secret for the neighborhood. You can swim in their beautiful pool. You have access to their gym. You can use the basketball courts if you like. They have ping pong tables, family spaces. Their hours are from 7 to 10 p.m. on weekdays, which isn't great, but then it's from 1 to 9 on weekends. So I'm a member and I went over there and the gym is really in disrepair and the equipment's way too close to each other. And I did a walkthrough with the SCA and the SCA's architects, and we were all alarmed to actually see a class take place in this space. There were 40 kids in this weight room and they were on top of each other. And it was just a huge accident waiting to happen. So
Where's this on?
it's on the fifth floor. So I can happily say that the SCA has been responsive. They were the ones that initiated the walkthrough. They know that something needs to be done. They don't have the money, of course. They're trying to figure out how to get it into the capital plan. They have been very responsive. I can't say they haven't. So up until now, the committee, there isn't anything for us to do because they're in process. But we're looking into supporting the school in terms of getting some Reso A funds. The borough president might get involved, but we're all pointed in the direction of trying to support the school. For those of you who know the space, it's a tiny little weight rooms flanked by 2 enormous unused locker rooms that used to be for visiting teams for their basketball, which have since been redone. They have a whole new locker room right down the hall. And these have just sat there wasting away with some old showers that are really disgusting. They've gone as far as putting rowing machines in these locker rooms because they've run out of room in the gym. So you will walk into the bathrooms to find people working out in that locker room. It is pretty crazy situation. So the proposal is that they demo those locker rooms, expand that gym space on the 5th floor to make it 2,500 square feet instead of the 700 square feet it is right now. So just wanted to announce that to the group. We'll be working on that over the next 30 days. And if I run into anything that needs our support, I'll put it on the agenda in June. And we'll also try to get Kelly to join us to let us know about high school and middle school acceptances. Is there anything else anybody wants to chase? Tammy's given us the task of getting the contact information for every school in Community District 1. She's encouraged me to break it up and give you all sort of a small assignment. So you may see that coming from me to chase info on 3 or 4 schools, if you guys don't mind.
Is that not consistent?
I provided them the list for,
I'm sorry to interrupt. The intern worked on that. She has all the principals and the assistant principals. We have that list.
okay, well, Tammy just emailed me asking.
I will share it with you. again.
Would you?
And she might want it updated.
Because I'm
No,
happy
The
to,
young lady that works here, the intern, she called all the schools and got all
Oh,
the
great.
contact information, emails, assistant principal.
Is Tammy thinking she wants more than that, like parent coordinator or PTA president or SLT president?
I do know that the principal and the assistant principal is on that list. If she wants to go beyond that, Please let us know, but I can share that with you guys.
The latest is bumping up. Need a full list so we can potentially do outreach to some active parents of elementary school age kids. Those who may want to be public members.
Yeah, that's a
We had
different
two-
topic, public members.
We had 2 resignations. Okay, so she's got all the elementary schools. She's asking for a full list. She does have that. So
I
I'll,
believe she does, the young lady, I'll make sure she works with you tomorrow and send
Okay.
it to you.
so what I'll say, Lucy, is if there's any schools that she was unable to find, just put them in my box. And then we'll just
Yeah.
have a look at it.
And as far as public member, I wrote a draft letter and I'm waiting for Tammy's approval to
Oh,
send it
great.
out to the schools.
Okay, perfect. And I told her I would attend, and I don't know if anybody else, it's tricky because it's during the day, but I have flexibility to be able to attend PTA meetings. We are having some trouble with engagement with community board in general. Not the least of which is with youth, because we really do need more parents of younger kids on the board. So I told Tammy that she was gonna go to 276, I'm gonna go to 234 and 150. And we're gonna sit in on some PTA meetings and try to get some engagement going with the parents. So if anybody's interested in joining, just let me know. But that's something that we'll be doing this month before school breaks.
Where can I point people to, because I know I have several parent friends that do that. So where-
Please have them write the office. So you can find, the contact information's on CB1 Manhattan website. You can also just talk to Lucy after the meeting and she can give you Zach's information or her information. But we would love to meet them and we really would like as much engagement as we can get. I mean, this community board helped get all of these schools built. I mean, it's absolutely the truth. So I think that we had this period of time in our history where there was a lot of engagement. And then I would say, after the crisis was mitigated, it kind of calmed down and everybody just kind of disappeared. And it's a great thing because they're not in crisis anymore, but I'm sure they have issues other than overcrowding that we could be helping them with. I do know the scaffolding at 234 eventually came to us, as did the Verizon Tower at Peck Slip. Like sometimes things will come, but I think if there are parents on the board or at least PTA engagement with the community board, we're more likely to see more issues and beef up our meetings a little bit. So, and
So, I don't know, but what this would yield, but maybe, on a nice Saturday, a table at the fields while the Little League games are going on.
that's a great idea.
Up on the upper terrace, we'll have a couple hundred parents.
That's a great idea.
Course of 2 or 3 hours.
Who would we talk to get that?
Well, I can coordinate.
Can you
with
make that
Lee,
happen?
And I'll speak to Nick. We just want to make sure DPCA doesn't have an issue with.
Okay.
that, but which I can't imagine they would. So I'll take that up.
All right, good. I think it's a great idea.
And soccer.
And the soccer and the ball, yeah.
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 All right, good. Any other ideas, just bring them, but otherwise I'll see you guys in June.
Motion to approve.
Lucy,
Yes, sir.
July 7th, are we moving the batting park to that?
I just actually sent an email while I was sitting here saying, now the 8th is open, work with Zach.
We're
So
officially
Zach does
adjourned.
Battery Park City.
We are officially adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Night.
Good night, Cody.
Bye.